Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's edition of the Seth Joyner Show. We're literally about 20 days away from September 13th when the Philadelphia Eagles take on the Washington football team. I almost made a snafu there. The Washington football team in Washington, D.C. What I wanted to do today is I want to bring in a good friend of mine because even though camp is going on, with the situation being what it is with the COVID and the training camp being the way that it's been, it seems like training camp is going on, but there's not a whole lot of information about what's really going on inside of those training camps. And who better to join me today than my good friend? Listen, this guy's been a fixture in Philadelphia sports for over 30 years. He's a sports writer, radio host, a TV personality, an analyst, and a longtime friend of mine. I want you guys to welcome to the show today my good friend, Ruben Frank. Ruben, how you doing, my man?
What's up, Seth? I like that introduction. I appreciate that. We came in together. Yeah, you came in 86. I came in 87. I started during the strike in 87. So, we kind of – I feel like we kind of came in together.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did. You just seem to stay around a lot longer than I was able to.
That's because Brandon wasn't my boss.
Oh, my gosh. Let's not go there.
I have to say one thing before we start. I got to tell everybody, things used to be different back then. Like now, like everything's all security and everything. I once asked Seth a question about a coverage or something, and Seth says, meet me tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock in the film room. And we sat there and watched. I don't know if you remember it. You brought me in to watch film with me. You taught me how to watch film, and we watched that play that I was asking you about, certain coverage. And nobody else has ever done that. I've covered this team 33 years. The only guy invited me in to watch film and actually try to understand the game a little more. I appreciate that. I always have. Well,
you're welcome, my friend. And I tell you what, I think that would be such a great synergistic marriage, if you will, if the media could have that opportunity to get to know players that way and see that side of players. And I think that there still are players like that, but that's outside of the realm of probably what's allowable right now. And it would be a look into and an opportunity for the media to see how players go about their business behind the scenes, because it's when you as a reporter stand in front of my locker or we do an interview, my responses are somewhat compartmentalized, if you will. There's certain things that I can say, there's certain things I can't say, so on and so forth. So that relationship is kind of sterile. But for me to have an opportunity to sit in a room and explain to you a coverage that, you had a question about, and for you to be able to now report or write in the newspaper about that, from my perspective, that gives the fans a whole different perspective, Rube.
Yeah, I miss that side of the game. And, there's enough video out there and enough analytics and you can watch the end zone camera and so we have a lot more at our disposal now than we did back then, but having that insight was invaluable back in the day, no doubt. We were in a little room on the first floor of the
vet. Listen, man, I started off talking about my viewers and their ability to be linked into what's really going on. First of all, I hope you and your family are doing well through all this craziness. And the most burning question that I'm getting from people on my social media platforms and people who actually come in and watch the show, do you think there's going to be a season? I think everyone's waiting for the hat to drop. They're looking at college football. They're looking at all the wavering that's going on as far as that's concerned. They're excited about basketball and hockey and baseball. The difference is, baseball isn't necessarily in a bubble, but there's a lot of concern among fans whether we get to a season and whether we'll actually even have a season. Your thoughts?
Yeah, these are all great questions. And I think if the NFL had to do it all over again, they would have tried to do a bubble. I think their whole thing was when this all started back in March, they were like, well, this is basketball's problem. This is hockey and baseball's problem now. We're in the fall. By the time the football season gets here, we're not going to have to worry about anything. Obviously, this hung around a lot longer, and all of a sudden it was a week before training camp, and they were like, well, we don't have a bubble. It was too late to plan one. I do think if there is a postseason, I think there will be a bubble. I think if they get that far, they're not going to take any chances, and they'll bring all the postseason teams, maybe to one city that's got a couple stadiums. But I do think there's some encouraging signs. And a month ago, I didn't think they had a chance to have a season. But the fact that the positive test rate is so low so far, it's a fraction of a percent. And that's encouraging. And the fact that teams have now been, doing live padded practices, team practices where, there is a lot of contact between players. There's tackling and there's blocking and there's close quarters. I think the fact that there haven't been a rash of positives, and that started about 9 days ago. So I think the next week is going to be really big. I think if we can get to the next week and keep that ratio under 1%, well under 1%, I think what you're seeing is a lot of players understand how much is at stake here. And you don't have guys going out to bars and clubs. The rookies are going back to their hotel. It might not be a bubble, but it's as close as possible to a bubble where guys aren't taking undue risks. They're not going, they're not going out. They're not going to motorcycle rallies or wherever there's big crowds. We talked to a bunch of the Eagles rookies. They go back to the hotel, they study their playbook, and they go back to the facility in the morning. And, the facility, I've been down there, and it's incredible. The protocols that they're taking, the safety. They got they got meals outside in a tent. So that reduces, the risk of being indoors. They've got the weight room in 3 different tents adjacent to the field. So that's outdoors. They got outdoor weight rooms, the hot tub. Everything's outdoors now, and it minimizes the time that they spend indoors. A lot of the guys are they get changed at the stadium, so they're using different locker rooms. They're taking every imaginable precaution. They're tested every day. So far, so good. Now, I really do think the next 7 to 10 days are going to be huge. I think if we can get to like the end of August, early September, first couple of days of September, without a big rash of positives, it's going to show that if you're outside and you're not in a big group and you're careful with where you go and who you're with, you're socially distant, you're wearing masks, you're taking every possible precaution, you can kind of keep this thing down. And so far they've done that. And I feel a lot more encouraged now that there's going to be a season than I did a month ago.
One of the things is whether we actually have, I'm echoing now, so I'm going to unplug my mic here and just go. Okay, can you hear me? Okay, so one of my issues is how realistic is it that 20-something-year-olds are going to maintain this level of security that that they've been able to implement throughout the entire this time of training camp. I tell people all the time, listen, there is going to be a football season. Okay, if the NFL can figure out a way to get these guys on the field, even in the midst of a couple of guys testing positive for it, because there's a difference between testing positive for it and having symptoms and testing positive for it and being asymptomatic. It would have to be a monumental outbreak, in my opinion, for the NFL to say season's over, we're going to scrub it. I mean, you're talking $12 to $15 billion, Rue. The NFL owners are not giving that up. They're just not giving it up. So you may have some players that miss 2 weeks because they have to quarantine. That doesn't mean that there aren't other football players out there that can step in, even if you got to pull them off the street. Now, the exception being, okay, we as Philadelphia Eagles fans, we don't want to go to a game and not see Carson Wentz be the quarterback. Yeah, that's the issue. We don't want to go to a game and not see, Darius Slay or Fletcher Cox on the field. But at the end of the day, with the NFL, it's always been about the bottom line. And the
Yep.
bottom line means that we've got to get 16 games in. We've got to have our postseason, and we've got to have a Super Bowl.
The numbers are staggering. The TV contract is so big. And I think the NFL's position is that even if we can get 6 games or 8 games, whatever we can get in, every team's going to make, so many $100 million for that many weeks. And ideally, ideally you get a whole season in, but they're going to try to squeeze as much in. And I think that's why it was so difficult for the PA and the owners to kind of come to protocol agreements, because, it's natural for the players to think, well, you're just putting us out there at risk just so you can get a few weeks of the TV deal here. The ownership made some concessions, and they put in the opt-out clause, and they're giving some money to the guys that opted out. There weren't that many. Surprised me a little bit, Seth. But the amount of money is staggering, and we all know that ownership does not have the players' best interests at heart. They have their wallets and their bottom lines at heart. I saw a stat today where the Eagles are worth $3.4 billion. Jeff Lurie bought the team in '94 for $185 million. So it's incredible how much money. And don't feel bad for the owners, because there's going to be a new TV deal, I guess, in 2 years. It's going to be even bigger than this one. So, I worry about the players. I don't worry about the owners. I worry about the players, and I just hope they're okay. I think the early signs are good. The stuff that they're doing down at the NovaCare, we're down there and we see the protocols and what they're doing to protect the players, and I feel like it's legit. I feel like the Eagles have a really good plan in place. But like you said, it only takes one rookie, one undrafted rookie, say, you know what, I had a bad day today at practice. I'm going to go out and hit the clubs tonight. Come back and he's in the meeting room the next day. That thing spreads quick. So guys have to be disciplined, and they have to be unselfish. They have to think about the big picture, not just themselves.
Okay, Bruce. So take us into training camp, because, like I said in my opening, training camp has been going on for quite some time, but there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of visual looks as to what's going on. There are reporters that are there, they're posting on social media and so on and so forth. And there are articles online that coaches are talking, there are Zoom interviews and all those types of things. But take us into camp, because the news has just been sparse. We're literally 20 days away from today, 20 days away from game 1. Give our viewers an opinion about what you've seen in training camp so far, and just your opinion, because I'm going to expound upon that as we continue to go position by position, so on and so forth.
Yeah, well, my biggest observation is that the defense is ahead of the offense, and I think that's the case most years when it comes to early in training camp. But I think this year it's even more pronounced, because with an offensive line, one guy makes one mistake, the defense is going to look great on that rep. If one guy makes a mistake, there's still other guys who can look good on that rep. But the offensive line is behind the Eagles' defensive line, and I think this Eagles D line has a chance to be very good if they can get everybody healthy at the same time. Malik Jackson is a beast. I think that's one of my big takeaways. We didn't see a lot of them last year. First Fletcher was hurt, and then Malik was hurt, so they never really got to play together. So we're getting our first taste of these two beasts at defensive tackle playing together, and it's impressive. And when Hargrave comes back, it'll be even more impressive, but he's missing some valuable time. I think another takeaway for me is that Jalen Reagor is better than I thought. And I know it's early. I know it's only 10 days. He's faster than I expected. He gets off the line of scrimmage against press. He's taken some reps against Darius Slay where he's fearless. He goes out there. You see a lot of kids, a lot of young receivers. They're going to defer to – Darius Slay's an all-pro. He's a 3-time Pro Bowler. A lot of young kids are going to defer to him. They're not going to have that aggressiveness. He attacks Darius Slay when they get reps together. He's confident. He's got some swagger, and he's beaten him. He's beaten him a few times. And then after every rep they tape together, you see the two of them talking. And Darius is explaining to him what he saw on that play, and Jalen's telling him what he was looking at. It's great work that they're getting together. I didn't like the pick, Seth, when they took it. I thought they should have taken Justin Jefferson, and maybe that'll turn out to be the case. And we're so used to the Eagles messing up their wide receiver draft picks going back to Kenny Jackson probably, but I like this kid. I like his attitude. I like his confidence. And I really like the way he gets off. I think the one thing you look for with young receivers is how do they get off? They don't see press coverage in college. You know, they're running free. So, you know, they all look like they have 4.3 speed. Now they're getting bumped at the line of scrimmage. They're getting a guy physical up at them in their face. How do they respond to that? Can they still, you know, break off the line of scrimmage? And this kid has done that. And that's been the most impressive thing to me. So one guy on each side of the ball that's really stood out to me in the early going.
You're watching the Seth Joyner show. I'm joining me today is Rube and Frank. You know, so Rube, as you're looking at this team, what is the one area of greatest concern? And what's the one area of the Eagles' greatest strength as you see it at the moment?
My biggest concern, and I'm going to go a different way, is this team's had so many injuries the last couple of years, and then you come in on day one, and Hargrave and Derek Barnett are hurt, and then Miles gets hurt, and he's out for a couple of weeks. My biggest concern is why does this team keep having so many injuries? And they've changed doctors, they've changed trainers, they've done all kinds of things. They've looked at the field surface at practice, and they still have more injuries than any team in the league. So they got to figure that out. But as far as position groups, I would say linebacker, only because I think they've got some young talent who are athletic and can run. And you know, but they just don't have experience. They don't have, you know, I think they don't have any linebackers over 26 years old. And sometimes you just need that veteran presence in the room, you know, the guy to kind of lead and guide the younger guys. I think Nate Gary's an okay player. You know, I think he's all right. You know, I guess this is how linebackers are going. They're young. They're young and physical, and they are young and athletic and can run. And if they can be physical, that's almost a bonus now. I mean, the position's changed so much since you played it. And I think all these guys can run and they can cover and you know, they're athletic guys. But I just worry about the lack of experience there and the lack of depth because they only have 3 linebackers who've ever played a defensive snap in the NFL, and you know, 2 of them haven't played that many. You know, one of them's played 129. So T.J. Edwards. So that's the position I worry about. You know, where's the leadership coming from? Where's the guidance coming from? You know, and the depth also. It's there's not a lot of experience at that spot.
What's the area of greatest strength, in your opinion?
I think D-line, like I said, but I still have some questions about the edge rushers. Obviously inside, I mean, they're loaded. But I think running back, all these guys look really good. I think Miles is a stud. I like Boston Scott a lot. I think he's a really effective red zone runner. He's a hell of a receiver. If he's your number 2 back, I think he's really good. Low center of gravity. He's physical. He's so good inside the 10-yard line. And that's a really rare skill. I think a lot of people think that you need a big bruising back at the goal line, but you don't. You need a guy with good vision, a guy who's tough and can move the pile a little bit, a guy with good footwork, a guy who, you know, can see the holes and can see, you know, run behind his blocks. You know, usually those big, slow guys, I don't like them at the goal line. You know, I like a shifty guy with good vision. Boston Scott has that. And if Corey Clement can stay healthy and he's your number 3, you know, he's a guy that can do a lot of things, play special teams, catch the ball. And I like this Elijah Holyfield kid. He's had a good camp, and you know, he ran like a 4.8 and you know, didn't get drafted and spent last year on Carolina's practice squad, but he does not play slow. And I think if you ran him at a 40 today, he'd probably run a lot faster than that. He just had a bad day. And that happens. Some guys kind of freeze up at the combine, and you know, then they got to run another one. They run that one slower because they're pressing. But, you know, I think he'll play a lot of special teams, and they can all catch the ball. They're all tough, and they got some talent. I think they're loaded at running back.
Yeah, I mean, I like the top 3 guys, but I really like, you know, the Holyfield kid coming out of Georgia. I thought he was a beast. As you look through training camp now, you know, there are these kids that are shining. And there are these kids whose light is fading in a major way. Give me your thoughts on who is just showing out and who is like hanging on by a thread.
Well, you're talking about rookies or just young guys in general?
Just everybody.
I think a couple guys whose stock is rising. Matt Pryor, the big O lineman, he's getting second team reps at right guard and right tackle now. He looks like a tackle. They like him at guard, but he looks like he's going to be kind of the first. And they're playing Melada at left tackle now, but I think Pryor's going to end up being like the big V guy who can kind of be the number 2 guy anywhere. He can play both guards and both tackles. He hasn't really got a lot of reps at left tackle, but we know he can play the other 3 spots. So he's really looked good. I think Rager's a guy who's just really kind of surprised me with the way he's played. Some of the youngsters like Davion Taylor is a guy who has shined. He's still raw, but he's so physical and so athletic. You put him on special teams this year, and then try to find some reps for him on defense next year. He's been really impressive. Jalen Hurts, man, Seth, I'm telling you, this kid can play. I knew he was athletic. I knew he could run. He could spin it, and that's been the really impressive thing about Jalen Hurts. I didn't know he could fire the ball. And there was a rep. I think it was yesterday. It might have been Sunday, where he rolled out of the pocket. It was a broken play. It was like a scramble drill, and he had that kid Deontay Burnett. Cravon LeBlanc had him blanketed, and he just kind of motioned him to break off the route and run inside in the end zone, and Burnett just broke inside, and the kid just fired it through traffic through a tight window. Burnett made a great catch, and man, I was fired up after that play. That was like a big time throwing on the run across his body into a tight window and making it up as he went along. That was impressive. This kid, they're going to find a role for him in the red zone, if nowhere else. I'll tell you what, Doug keeps saying Nate Sudfeld's the number 2, and I understand that. He's been in the league 5 years. He's been here 4 years. He knows the offense. I'd be tempted to make Jalen Hurts my number 2. Right? The kid can do a lot, and without preseason games, it's tough to know how is he going to respond. To a bad play, to an interception, a fumble. But I think the kid's the kid's got character. He's a fighter. He's a competitor. A lot of rookies don't even think about making that throw. That really showed me something that he just thought about making that throw, and just kind of the way he ran the offense on that play. We've seen that a lot from him. So he's really been impressive. Guys on the other side of the ledger, I mentioned Melada. He just hasn't had a great camp. He's a guy that, they took in the 7th round, took a flyer on him. He's got unique size and athleticism, but he's hurt again. He didn't practice today, so I'm not sure he's got much of a future here. It was worth a 7th round pick. You see if you can make him a player. Sidney Jones been a huge disappointment. Gets hurt the second day of practice, hasn't come back. It's been the story of his career. 4 years now, he's always been hurt. He showed some flashes at the end of last year. A play here, he had that big pass breakup against Dak. He had a pick in the Giants game in the end zone to put that game away. And I started to think maybe if they can get him healthy, he can really focus on his body during the offseason, get those hamstrings healthy. And then the second day of practice, he's back in the tub. So I'm not sure he's long for this roster. He's been a big disappointment.
Well, you completely messed up the flow of my show by giving us so much information all over the place. We'll just take it organic now. But one of the things to me that's a major concern as coaches, how do you legitimately and fairly evaluate, the new talent on this football team? I'm not just talking about the new free agents that you've brought in, that you signed. I'm talking about these young guys that will not get an opportunity with no preseason to actually show you, to your point, Jalen Hurts. You can look really good in practice, but practice is limited. Where things get ratcheted up is in a game type situation. And some of these young players are not going to, be allowed to show the coaching staff what they can do. That's one. Two, is it possible that from a personnel perspective that Doug and Howie and the brain trust that puts this roster together could make a mistake along the way because they don't have the ability to evaluate these players properly because there is no preseason.
There's no question about it. And Dave Phipp had an interesting point because we asked him that question, because I think special teams, like, you can run live drills on offense and defense, but nobody's running live special teams reps. And he said he went back and watched college film of these guys to see how they respond in that atmosphere, what kind of specialty, because you can't tell at practice what kind of, a guy's got to really want it to play, to be a gunner or to go run down there, a punt coverage or whatever. So he watched a lot of college film of the guys, these young guys, to really get a sense of it. But you're right. There's going to be guys that fall by the wayside. And, you think about guys who played great. Some guys are just gamers. Some guys don't have good practices, and they play great in the preseason games. And they're not going to have that opportunity, and mistakes are going to be made. There's no doubt about it. The good thing is the practice squads are 16 guys now. So if there's a guy you're not sure about, you might have a better chance of keeping him around. Between the 53 and the practice squad, that's 69 guys you can keep out of 80 who are in practice now. So maybe somebody gets claimed off your practice squad, but now the teams that are doing the claiming, they haven't seen that guy in a game either. So it's unlikely that that's going to happen. So I think people are going to lose opportunities, and Hurts is a guy. Some of the young defensive backs are guys that some of the young receivers. I just want to see this guy in a game. It's just, the good thing is every team's in the same position. So every team's going to be out there with kind of an iffy roster. I think there's only probably, 4 or 5 roster spots that are really up for grabs right now. So it's not like there's going to be wholesale mistakes made, but the bottom of the roster, which is essentially special teams and depth, there's really no perfect way to evaluate these guys, and that's just the reality of this year.
Well, in that respect, man, I really feel for these young guys, because if I take myself back to that point in time, without special teams, no one ever hears of Seth Joyner, because I didn't really get an opportunity to show what I could do, as a linebacker. I made the team as a special teams player, and without those 4 games being able to show the coaching staff what I could do, I might not have gotten an opportunity to get to a point where I could get on the field. Rube, how has Carson looked? I've heard some good things, and I've tried to stay up on stuff by reading, kind of a play-by-play by some of the media people that talk about some of the great throws that he's made. I've heard he's still having some accuracy, issues from time to time. In your opinion, how has he looked?
I think he's looked okay. I don't worry about him. I don't think he's had a great camp, but I think also the defensive line has been so dominating, and the O-line has struggled. Lane and Dillard have both been in and out of practice. JP is learning a new position. So really the only settled spots are Kelsey and Sayamalo left guard. And that D-line is just dominating in almost every rep, almost every drill. So he hasn't had a lot of time. He hasn't had a lot of protection. How much of a concern is that going into the opener? It's a concern. You look at Washington certainly can get to the quarterback. But I think if you protect Carson, he'll be fine. I think he's got, you look at the weapons he's got, I'm crying out loud. He's never had, you got Miles and Boston as running backs, and you got Rager and you got Deshaun healthy, and he looks as fast as ever. And Ertz and Goddard at tight end, and Greg Ward in there, who I think is a really good slot. So he's got the weapons. I think he's got the ability to, if he's under pressure, he's got a lot of really good underneath options. I mean, between Ward and you remember, Ward only played a few games last year. He caught like 28 balls in like 5 games. He caught more balls in 5 games like Matt Collins caught in his career. It's crazy. How could he could not get in the roster before that? But anyway, his underneath options are going to be great. And I think once you see everybody kind of on the field together, I think he'll be okay. He's got a great connection with Deshaun, and obviously with Ertz. So I think he'll be all right. I worry about the O-line a little bit just because they haven't had those 5 guys together. And it's easy to say JP's a great player, just put him at right guard. But it's a transition. I mean, it's not the easiest thing. He's played in the same place for a long time, and He's at a different position and on a different side of the field, different side of the line. So he's got to get some valuable reps, and they got to get some reps together. They got to get those 5 guys on the field together and get them up to speed.
You know, I want to stay here on Carson for a minute because one of the big questions coming into the season at the end of last year was, his leadership. And there have been a lot of national pundits and gurus that have, chimed in on Carson's leadership ability and how the team would rally around him as the leader. And any interview that I've been on, any conversation that I've had with someone, I said what I witnessed last year over the last 6 games of the season is Carson Wentz finally stepping into his rightful place as the leader of this football team. And when you hear the young guys, when you heard a Greg Ward and a Perkins and a Boston Scott talk about going to Carson and Carson being helpful, to me, that makes all the difference in the world. And I think that's one of the reasons also, besides the need, why you saw, the Eagles draft 3 wide receivers and trade for another one in this instance. Because in my opinion, what happened with Nick Foles on his football team and the way that, whether people want to accept it and believe it or not, the way that locker room was divided, Foles guys, Wentz guys, it created a situation where, Carson couldn't be the unquestioned leader of the team. But when certain characters were no longer on the field towards the end of last year, you really saw him develop. You really saw those young guys go to him for leadership. And even when you talk about a guy like Jalen Reagor and how he's talking, to Carson and how they spend time together. And just even, I haven't seen Jalen Reagor, but from the things that you're telling me, when he is going against Darius Slay, and he has the wherewithal to go and have a conversation with Darius Slay to kind of talk about, hey, what do you see? Hey, what am I seeing? And to be able to talk to Carson Wentz, hey, what are you seeing? What am I seeing? That speaks volumes. Because if there's one thing that I could do as an ex-player, I would go back in all of my years of playing. I knew Buddy's defense backwards and forwards. I could tell you what everyone on the field was supposed to do, okay? If I could have changed anything as a player, I'd go back, and every offensive coordinator I played against, I would have gotten his ear. Every quarterback that I played against, I would have gotten his ear, because then they're able to give me insight as to what they're looking at that I'm looking at. And now I can see the game from a different perspective, okay? So all that to say that, where do you see Carson as a leader on this team right now? And have they made the necessary changes to allow him to step into that role so that we don't have to continue to have these nonsensical conversations?
No, I think it's a great point. And, there's not a lot of receivers left, or really there's not a lot of offensive skill players left that played with Nick. I mean, there's not a lot of guys on the team from 2017. It's really a new team. And yeah, it was going to be impossible. After what Nick did in 2017, it was natural that guys looked at him a certain way and looked at Carson a different way. And that was just a reality. That's why Nick wasn't here after 2018. But Jalen Reagor he's never played with Nick Foles. He's J.J. Arcega-Whiteside's never played with Nick Foles. I don't worry about Ertz because he loves everybody. Goddard played a year with Nick, but I think that people talk about leadership, and I think it's something that you can't rush, you can't force it. Guys grow into it, and I think you're absolutely right. When you look at the last month and a half of last year, he was out there with Robert Davis. He was out there with Greg Ward. He was out there with Deontay Burnett. They cut Rob Davis this morning, and I was looking. He played 45 snaps in that Seattle playoff game. He was their number 2 receiver. And, and that's what Carson – so he had no choice but to really – Mac Hollins was gone. Nelly was hurt. He wasn't playing. Alshon was hurt. He wasn't in the equation. Deshaun, I don't think Deshaun has any problem with Carson. I think they're fine. But it was almost by default. He had to develop those leadership skills. And it just kind of finally clicked for him. And you could see it. I mean, you could see it in the huddle. You could see it on the sideline. I thought that last stretch of the season, he put the team on his back and carried them. He was incredible. I mean, they were 7-9, or they were 5-7. They won their last 4 games without a receiver. They didn't have anybody. They had a practice squad. Greg Ward was their best receiver down the stretch, and he'd been on the practice squad a week earlier. So, I think that was – and I think that was a big part of this team getting younger during the offseason, and Howie just saying, you know what, Malcolm Jenkins, great player. It's time to move on. Camus, Nigel Bradham, all the older players that they moved on from. It's like, this is Carson's team now. And it was really time. It had to happen, and it's now happened.
Well, see, in my opinion, once they made the decision at the end of last season that they weren't going to wait and have Carson play out the last year of his deal, that they were going to re-up him, that sped up the time clock for everything. There were certain guys that had to go, and there was a certain change that had to be made. And when you look at the last two drafts have really been offensive centric. When you think about the development of this team, they're saying, okay, we're going to pay our quarterback, the most important player on the team, $30+ million a year, then we're going to build around him to ensure his success. And that's the way that I saw it going. And the only way that they were going to do that is to make those necessary changes to allow him to step into that role. Staying on quarterbacks, you talked about Jalen Hurts and how well he's looked. I've been reading, and everybody's shocked and awed at his poise, at his ability, on the field as a passer of the ball, as a guy who can run the ball, without a preseason, without having the ability to look at him in a game type situation, with him being a second round pick. Okay. How are they gonna extrapolate some return on investment out of him this year? Or is he a guy that basically you're looking at value down the road?
That's a great question. And it's a question that we can't, it's hard to tell, but they have to find a way. You can't draft a guy in the second round. And, people are talking about, well, if he's up on game day, he's got to be up on game day. And even if he's the number 3, they got to find a way to have 3 quarterbacks active, which Doug usually doesn't do. But whether you run him in some, you run some wildcat with him, I think down at the goal line he'll be a weapon. But then you've got to balance it with if do you want Carson off the field, or do you want Carson, lining up, as a wide receiver and having somebody take him out. But I think there will be a package for him. I think there has to be. I think he's too good to keep him under wraps, Seth. I mean, that guy. I think that's what this period's about. Let's see what he does well. We don't really see them running a lot of gadget stuff with him, and practice is open right now. So, maybe when it closes up, they'll install that stuff. They just don't want us to see it. But I think they got to find something for him. I think he's too good to not have some sort of role. And I think it's one of the things Rich Scangarello is here for. He's kind of like the new, creative guy who's trying to find, new wrinkles and new ways to use, deploy talent. And, I think they got to find something for him. If it was me, he'd be my number 2 quarterback going into the opener. It looks like he can handle it. And again, Sudfeld's okay. I think he's a good backup, but I think this kid has a chance to be special. Now, I don't want to get carried away. I know it's only a week and a half of training camp, and we tend to get carried away with guys. But this is a guy who is one of the most accomplished college football players. I mean, who's the last guy this accomplished that the Eagles drafted? I mean, I was trying to think about that. I can't think of a Heisman Trophy winner that they've drafted. Don McPherson, he wasn't a big time prospect. Right. I don't know. Keith Byers, maybe. I mean, he was a hell of a player at Ohio State. I don't know. He didn't win the Heisman, did he? Was he second?
No, he came in second to Doug Flutie.
Oh, okay. That was his junior year, right?
Yeah.
I guess and then I think he might have been a little banged up his senior year. Doug Flutie. Yeah. So, he's probably the most decorated college player they've drafted since, and that was 86. That was 34 years ago. So I think they got to find something for him to do.
Rube, you kind of alluded to, some of the coaching changes, not necessarily the coaching changes, but the guy who's brought in to be the, creative mind on the defensive side of the ball, on the offensive side of the ball, excuse me. One of my major concerns, about the Philadelphia Eagles has been their ability from a coaching standpoint to develop and improve upon the skill sets of players, because I always feel like a player is a blank slate when he comes from college. His ability to improve is inherently connected to his position coach's ability to teach him and help him get better. It's one thing for a coach to hand me X's and O's. It's another thing for a coach to get me on the field and walk me through situations and teach me through film study how I can get better and what I have to do to get better. There's a lot of turnover on the Philadelphia Eagles coaching roster this year. You got a new wide receiver coach, you got a new DB coach, you got a new D-line coach. I mean, they made a lot of changes. Just kind of touch on and tell me what you see from a teaching standpoint that's different from last year's coaching staff and what you see these coaches being able to implement and help these young players get better.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great point. And you look at Doug Peterson's record hiring coaches, it is terrible. I mean, like you said, they've gone through 5 wide receivers coaches. They've gone through 3 D-line coaches in 4 years. Doug's best coaches are the guys that he inherited from Chip Kelly. Chip, I think he's still got 6 of Chip's coaches working for him, including Stoutland and Press Taylor and Justin Peel, the tight ends coach, and Dave Phipp was with Chip, and Matt Harper was with Chip. So the coaches he inherited, he kept, and the coaches he hired, he's fired. Marquand Manuel and Aaron Moorhead, especially the D-backs coach and the receivers coach, I've been so impressed with these guys. They're former players. They're hands-on. They're teaching. Use that word teaching. And I think Corey Unlin, with what he had, did fine. But you can just tell these guys have so much respect among the players. I think they've upgraded the coaching staff dramatically. Aaron Moorhead, the last wide receivers coach, I don't want to even say his name. I don't want to be disrespectful. But, you can tell at one practice, he wasn't teaching anybody anything. And then, you watch young receivers. Why aren't they getting better? Well, they're not getting coached. They're not getting taught. And these guys are getting coached. They're getting taught. And I think it's going to make a huge difference in those 2 areas. They had to upgrade wide receivers and secondary. And they've done both roster-wise and coaching-wise. And I think those 2 moves are really underrated. Marquand Manuel and Aaron Moorhead have been so impressive. They're fun to watch. There's some coaches you can just tell. John Harbaugh was like that when he got here in '98. There's some assistant coaches that you see, you just know this guy. Sean McDermott was like that when he was a position coach. Jeff Fisher was like that when he was a secondary coach. Certain guys, you could just tell they're getting through. They know the game, and they know how to motivate guys, and they're getting guys better. You can just see the improvement. And when young players don't get better, and that's why a lot of people rip on Howie for his draft picks, and they have been great, but are they picking the wrong guys, or are they just not developing them? Or it's probably a little of both. But when you see young guys go somewhere else and do well, they're just not getting coached here. I think they've really upgraded the coaching staff. I think it's going to make a big difference.
And that's always been, a pet peeve of mine, because, you could see the Eagles draft a player that has some talent on the collegiate level. He'd get to the pro level, and they wait 2, 3, 4 years, and the kid never develops. And then he goes somewhere else, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this kid's making plays. He's going to the Pro Bowl. He's playing in Super Bowls. So when I used to see stuff like that, I'm like, these guys are not getting the development that's necessary. Because to me, the most important time in a young player's career is the first 3 years of his career. If he plays, barring injury, and he's on the field, he's getting experience, okay, and if he doesn't turn it around by year 3, if he's not making and ascent by year 3, then he is what he is, and it's not going to change. I've seen a lot of that over the years with the Philadelphia Eagles. So I'm really with bated breath. I'm waiting to see what this secondary and what this wide receiver core looks like, because I understand the importance, of technique and fundamentals, learning how to study, teaching guys, the importance of being on a string and communication and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you would watch guys in our secondary for years. Guys score a touchdown, the cornerback's looking at the safety's looking at the cornerback. That tells me that you're not communicating, because if you don't talk about it before the play, once the play starts, it's too late. Everything, the bullets are flying is way, way too fast. So I'm really excited about these changes, not only because, they're changes, but because these guys have a history of being good coaches in the league. These guys have histories of playing in the league, and they can relate to today's player in a way that maybe the past coaches haven't been able to.
Yeah, no question about it. And I think you also need some consistency at these spots, and they haven't had that. You need the same players for a few years and the same coaches, and then they just develop that, that special relationship. And that's, those are the teams you see do well, that have that consistency both on the team and in the coaching staff.
How about a little bit of accountability? It's one thing to make a mistake. It's another thing to be held accountable for that mistake. And it's a couple of different things. It's the coach holding you, accountable in the moment. It's how you hold a player accountable in the film room, in front of, not only his positional guys, but in front of the entire defense. I know one of the things that we dreaded the most was going in on Monday, watching game film with the entire defense and Buddy sitting at the helm, rolling the tape, because he was going to put you on Front Street. He was going to hold you accountable. Listen, the players already know. They're looking at the film. They can see. They know what's going on. But it's another thing when the coach holds you to a certain standard, and then he puts you, he puts it in a way where everyone realizes that, that standard is applicable to me as well as that guy. So if he's not getting it done, yeah, we expect for him to raise his level. If I'm not getting it done, I expect for him, to put the onus on me to raise my level. And sometimes I don't see that. When you see it, to me, when you see guys repeatedly make the same mistake, perfect case in point, okay? How many times the Philadelphia Eagles cornerback's been beat on a slant and go over the last 3 years, okay? To me, that's a coaching issue, okay? That's a coaching issue. How do you teach that guy how not to get beat by that move? Because it's coming. If they run 3 slants, at some point in time, they're going to take it up. So to me, that's a coaching issue, and how you hold your players accountable to play at a certain level. And if you hold everyone accountable to that certain level, now you got yourself a good football team.
I would bet you anything, and I'm not going to say J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is going to be a great player or have a great year, but I would guarantee you he looks like a different guy this year. Now, he might only catch 30 passes because I don't think he's going to play that much because they got other guys, but I think you'll see that Aaron Moorhead. I think you're going to see that effect of these new coaches right from the jump.
Well, you just answered one of my questions here. So we talked about Rager and how we weren't sure of the pick, but the early returns are saying that, hey, this was the guy that they wanted. He's coming to training camp and he's shown, that he was that guy. So now the Eagles, Howie's mandate was speed, guys that love football and guys that can stay healthy. Okay. So in the draft, he went and he also drafted Hightower and Watkins. What are their chances? What do they look like in camp? And what are their chances of making the 53-man roster?
Yeah, Quez has actually been probably a little ahead of Hightower. They're both fast, but, they both got a lot to learn as far as, just beating, press coverage and the NFL game. If they do make the team, I think one of them, I think Quez will probably make the 53. Could go either way. I don't think they're going to play a lot as rookies. You might see him, one of them in there a little bit, but they're late round guys for a reason. They're fast, and that gives you something to work with. But they got a lot to learn, like most wide receivers drafted in this, 5th, 6th round.
Well, you talked about it early again, the injuries, and it's a major concern. And the biggest concern is because if you can't dominate this one area, then you can't win at the game of football. The offensive line, the defensive line. I guess, my biggest concern is still Andre Dillard. My second concern on the offensive line is Jason Peters' health. And then on the defensive side, I think Derek Barnett, in my opinion, is in a make or break year. They didn't pick up his 5th-year option. So he's going to say it again.
There's no way. They'll either sign him to a long-term deal or they'll let him go because, that number is going to be like $10 million. So if you like him enough to pay him the 5th-year option, you're going to sign him to a long-term deal and lower that cap number.
From what I'm hearing, you validated it. Hargrave has been extremely impressive. That's great for Fletcher Cox. I think you're going to get
Hargrave hasn't practiced yet, so they're still trying to get him healthy.
Well, the Hargrave issue, that's concerning. Okay, so now he's down. I'm wondering how serious that is. They bring in T.Y. McGill for a workout. Not sure whether they actually, have intentions on signing him. I think a lot of that has to do with, what Hargrave's situation is. But I'm really looking forward to a guy like Malik Jackson and Hargrave, if we can keep him healthy, being able to line up next to Fletcher Cox and take some pressure off of him where you don't have 600 pounds laying on him every single play. Give me your thoughts as far as the defensive tackle position is concerned and how that's going to affect Fletcher Cox's ability, to take it up even to another level.
Yeah, there's no question. If they can get Hargrave healthy, you have that rotation. You can kick Malik Jackson. He can line up outside some reps.
Mm-hmm.
You can rotate those guys. I think Hassan Ridgeway, if he's your 4th guy, he's pretty good too. He played pretty well before he got hurt last year. And they got this young kid from, I think, Michigan State, Raekwon Williams, who's undrafted rookie, who's been pretty impressive too. He's a big, strong kid. So they have incredible depth at D tackle. I wish they had the same talent and depth outside because that's really what you need to take some of those double teams off Fletch. BG's a tremendous effort guy. He's had a great career. But he's 32. And Derek Barnett, he just keeps getting hurt. He's underachieved. He was the 14th pick in the draft. He's got 14 sacks in 3 years. So I'm tired about hearing about, just once he's healthy. He's always hurt. He's always hurt, and he's underachieved when he's been healthy. So I don't think he has enough moves. I don't think he has enough variety in this game. And I think he plays – he's an undersized guy. He's not a big guy, and he plays hard. He's always playing hard, but he's going up against these 335-pound tackles, and I don't know if he can stay healthy doing that all the time. So you might have to, make him more of a situational guy. I don't know, but they just don't have, Josh Sweat, I don't know. He's a 4th-round pick. They have a bunch of guys, but, who's going to rush the passer from the edge? I just don't know where that's going to come from.
Well, this is my opinion. I think that the NFL defensively is no longer, a 4-3, 3-4 type, defensive deal. Most teams are running 3 tight ends, three wide receivers, 2 tight end situations that requires you to be basically a 4-2 defense, no matter what you do.
Yeah.
The defensive end position is a major concern because you don't have the push from the outside. You're 100% correct on Derek Barnett. My biggest criticism of Derek Barnett is that he's got one move and he can beat you maybe once or twice a game because he'll catch you with it off guard. Right. He's got a speed rush. Okay. Every once in a while, if he catches you off balance, okay, he's going to speed the power because he's got you off balance. But you're talking about a 265-pound guy playing against everyone's best offensive lineman at left tackle. at 325 to 335 pounds, yeah, he's going to get beat up and he's going to stay hurt because he should really be a situational defensive end rather than a guy who plays, 50, 60% of the plays.
Absolutely.
He just cannot. And I said when they drafted him, he needs to put on about 15, 20 pounds. He needs to get stronger. He needs to diversify his moves. He has no counter moves off of any of the moves that he does. And that's problematic. One of the things that I was really hoping, and, darn it, the Cowboys, went and grabbed the guy. I wanted them to go and get Everson Griffin. Now, I know the guy's had some issues, but he had 8.5 sacks last year. There's only one player on the team that had more sacks than him last year, and I believe was that Brandon? Maybe that was the year before he had 9.5 sacks. Okay, but that guy is a prototypical 4-3 defensive end from the standpoint where you can line him up over there and he can play the line shares, and then you can rotate that guy. Now, maybe the price tag was a little too much. Maybe, how we looked at the situation and said, hey, you know what? We can't risk, with his past history, we can't risk bringing the guy in, but that's a position of major concern for me because when Josh Sweat comes in, when Vinny Curry comes in, I mean, you're talking about 3 guys that are averaging about 5 sacks apiece per year. That's just not enough. That's not enough, Rube. Not for a position where on every predictable passing situation, you're tasked with getting to the quarterback. 5 sacks in 16 games is just not enough, in my opinion.
No, I'm right with you. I think Josh Sweat had 4 last year. Vinny had 5, and it was the second most of his career. And they're both high effort guys and they're character guys. They're just not that good. And I love him. He's one of my favorite guys. But I mean, he was a 2nd round pick like 8 years ago, and he's got 28 career sacks, 30 sacks. So, he is what he is. He can play the run a little bit, which he didn't do when he first got here. But they need a stud out there. They haven't had that for a while.
Well, let's change gears and look at the secondary. It seems like, Slay, NRC, McLeod, and Maddox are going to be your starters. Obviously Jones hurt again. And then the Eagles just signed Trevor Williams yesterday. Is that a sign of the time for Sidney Jones? I know we kind of touched on him earlier, but does that signing and Sidney missing 6 days of practice, does that pretty much seal his deal here? Do you see him making the roster?
Yeah, that was my first.
If he doesn't beat out, and it looks it's not going to happen. If he doesn't beat out, Avonte Maddox, do you see him on this roster this year?
2nd round pick, But yeah, I think as soon as they signed Trevor Williams, my first thought was that's it for Sidney. We don't know how serious that injury is, but it's been he practiced. He got through 1 day of practice and got hurt. I think we've seen, like you said, if you don't see it after those first 3 years, most times you're just not going to see it. And I think when this camp started, I thought he was going to really challenge Avonte for that, CB2 spot opposite Slay, but he never got any reps with the ones even before he got hurt. Then he got hurt. Yeah, the price practiced 1 day. So, and opening day is less than 3 weeks away. So, I don't think he's a guy that you want as a backup just because he's always getting hurt. A guy who comes in as a backup, you gotta really rely on that guy. He might not be great, but he's gotta be dependable. He's got to show up and can't be injured. You can have an injury prone guy as your backup cornerback. So, I think he's more talented than Rasul Douglas, probably more talented than Trevor Williams, but I think they've run out of patience with Sidney Jones. If I had to guess right now, I don't think he'll be on the 53.
What did he look like in practice for the 1 day? I mean, just looking at him physically, because my assertion has always been that he's been too small. And people say, well, was 22 that played cornerback for us. It was really good. I remember the number, but I can't remember his name. Say it again.
Asante Samuel?
Yes. They said, oh, he's built like Asante Samuel. Well, you can be built like a guy. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to play like him. My issue with Sidney was when they finally got him back and they said, okay, we're going to play him. I felt they brought him back too early. That one game and then put him back on, it didn't make any sense to me.
Yep.
The other thing is, sources have told me that Sidney would be in the workout, in the training area, and he had like 145 pounds doing squats, and the trainer would ask him, why are you doing so little? And his fear was he was going to pop the Achilles again. So he could never get his confidence back in the weight room. And if you don't get your confidence back in the weight room, that means that you're never going to find your confidence to do what you have to do, on the football field. So as the offseason rolled down and the guys were, getting ready to come back in, my thing was I want to see with my own eyes what Sidney Jones looks like. Because if he still looks like he looked when they drafted him and he still looks the way that he looked last year, that confidence is not going to be there any more than it's been the last couple of years. And we're not going to get anything out of him. So that's the reason why I asked, what does he look like? Does he look like he bulked up? Does he look like, he's gotten any stronger? Or does he look like he did last year?
I thought he looked okay. I thought he looked strong. He looked, he didn't look small. But I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think he's afraid to bust it. I think he feels like if he busts it, that he's gonna blow his hamstring out again, or maybe his Achilles. He was a pretty fast guy before he got hurt at his pro day a few years ago, but we've never seen that. And I think when a guy keeps getting hurt, the plays he's made have been in the red zone. Like when he's flashed, it's been in the red zone where speed isn't really, what you're measured by. So, like the interception against the Giants, it was in the end zone at the end of the game last year. It was a great play. It was a big play, but it was in the red zone. The pass breakup on Dak, you look at those plays, but I just think he's afraid to bust it open. I don't think we've ever really seen him run the way he did before he got hurt. And if you have a cornerback that's afraid to bust it wide open, that's not a guy you want covering Amari Cooper right there. So I don't know if he can ever trust those hammies again. He's been hurt so much, and it has cumulative effect on your body. You're just not the same guy anymore. So I think that's what we've seen with him.
I'll tell you this. I honestly believe that, his issues are more psychological than anything. And if he could get around the right person that could, get him thinking the right way in the right place, from a mental state, that there's just too much talent. I mean, you don't have first round talent and drop into the second round because of injury. And you just can't play. The kid can play. The problem is, people don't realize that, these 6 inches between the ears are more important than any other facet of your game, because you can get in the weight room. You can learn the defense. You can work on speed and reaction and quickness. But if your mind isn't in the right place, then your body can never do what you've conditioned it to do because you're not thinking the right way. As we wind down, we talked about the linebackers. It looks like Gary and, Schwartz and Coach Flagel love Gary's ability to, to think on the field. They see him as a highly intelligent player, but my question to you, will that transfer into playmaking? Because a player can be smart. I've seen many smart players that aren't productive on the football field. And what does that production look like? Because you can hold a guy in high esteem and say that he understands what he's supposed to do. He knows where he's supposed to get guys lined up. But at the end of the day, from a positional standpoint, it always comes down to production. So first, give me your take on that. I haven't heard a lot about Taylor, but I know that he's highly, highly athletic. I saw, some quotes by Flagel that said that, hey, he's got some learning to do, but the potential and some of the skill sets that he possesses, you can't coach and you can't teach. The Bradley kid out of Temple, I coached him in the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl. I was hoping beyond hope that the Eagles would draft him. They wind up drafting him. I see that he's been flashing a lot. He's a guy that loves to chatter. I love the guy. Yeah, and I warned him about that. But it seems that Coach Flazier likes that. He likes that confidence. To me, that's great, just as long as there's a boundary in which you use it. But looking at the other linebackers, my goodness, if Edwards and Gary are your starters, if Duke Riley is going to be your number 3 coming in 2 tight end sets and multiple tight end sets, what does that mean for these young guys and how they fit and how fast can they adjust and find a spot, find some playing time for themselves this year? Because I do think that that Bradley, has the ability, to overstep all of these guys once he knows what he's doing, because he's strong, he's fast, he plays physical, he plays with an edge, and he's always around the football.
And he went to the same high school as Irving Fryer and Franco Harris too, Ranco Valley. I think Bradley could end up being the best of the bunch. I think Taylor – I just don't see Taylor playing on defense this year. I think he's a project. He's raw. I think he'll play on special teams. But I think Bradley's got a chance. He's got to be consistent, though. That's the thing. I think that was a knock on him at Temple. He would play – he would have really good play, and then he would, have not so good play. So he's just got to be more consistent. Who came to mind? You were talking about players that are really smart. Jim Johnson loved Sean Considine. He was like, Sean Considine is one of the smartest players I've ever been around. He just wasn't very good. He was just okay. But man, he was smart. He could probably be a coach. And Nate Gary might be in that category. I think he can cover. I think he can run. He's got pretty good hands, so he'll get his hands on a couple balls. He's got to get better tackling. He was a bad tackler last year. He missed a lot of tackles, and you just can't have that. I don't really know what they have in T.J. Edwards and Duke Riley. I think T.J. Edwards has to be a guy who's playing on rundowns, short yardage, goal line, and that kind of thing. We talked to him today, and he said, "Hey, I can cover." He had a nice pick in the end zone off Sudfeld, and Sudfeld went over and told him, "I didn't think he could cover." And so he says he can cover, but I don't think you'll see him in that situation very often. And Duke Riley, I don't really know what they have in him. I thought he was just a special teamer, but he was actually a pretty high draft pick. I think he was a 3 when he came out. He was a 3, so he's got some ability, and we'll just have to see. I really don't know. I think that linebacker crew, they could be pretty good, or they could be really not so good. We just don't know what they have.
I tell you what, I've not that I've never missed a tackle, because I've missed my share. But I've always been of the thought that, tackling is basically want to. You either want that guy down worse than he wants to go down, or he wants to stay up worse than you want him down. So to me, it's a mentality. It's a way of thinking. In closing, give me your prospects on the NFC East. Obviously, it's going to come down to the Eagles and the Cowboys, barring, some catastrophic injuries on both of those teams. What do you think the division looks like, and the Birds' chances for another playoff and potential Super Bowl run? And give me your 16-game prediction. I got to get that out of you.
Oh man, you're putting me on the spot. It's so hard to say. It feels like, in a way, the first week of training camp. But in another way, you look at the calendar and you say, that game in Washington's like 2.5 weeks away. So it's kind of crazy. I think Dallas has more proven veteran talent than the Eagles do. I don't think that's, debatable. I mean, they've got Pro Bowlers up and down the roster. The Eagles are a younger team. They're trying to do it a different way. Dallas loves to build. Jerry loves to build, with a lot of veterans. And, that's kind of how the Eagles won a Super Bowl a few years ago, with a lot of veterans who were at the end of their careers, the LeGarretts and Jay Giles and Patrick Robinsons and Chris Longs, and just those guys who were kind of later in their career. That now they're a much younger team. I think they probably have a better future than Dallas, but I think Dallas might be a little better this year. I think one important thing, and I think the Giants have some good young talent too, but I think they're still a couple of years away. I think whoever kind of manages adversity is gonna win this division, because there's gonna be guys. I mean, they had like all these false positives on Sunday. If there was a game day, those guys wouldn't have played. So I think there's going to be coaches coming and going. There's going to be days where you don't have your quarterback. There's going to be days where you might not have your top 2 running backs, and you're out there. So I think whoever kind of handles the adversity the best is going to be the team that wins the division. I think one thing we've learned about Doug Peterson in his 4 years here is he's really good at handling adversity. Whether it's a 5-game losing streak in 2016 and kind of working through that, winning your last couple games, or some of the injuries in 2017 and losing Carson and then going on a run, and the injuries the last 2 years and still making the playoffs. I think that's Doug's strength as a coach, is kind of keeping his team focused and involved and engaged when things are going crazy around you. And I'm not sure Dallas has that. I think Dallas might be more talented, but I think the Eagles win the division. I think it's a 10-win team. I think 11's not out of the question. They're going to need Jalen Reagor to be a productive rookie. They're going to need, Jalen Mills to be able to handle safety. So there's a lot of ifs. But I like the team's mentality. I like the attitude. Without OTAs and spring practices, they've looked a lot sharper than I expected in training camp so far. I think if they can keep this thing healthy, I think they're going to be pretty good.
One thing, Rube, as we wrap up, there isn't an if. The team that stands between the Eagles and the NFC East title, in my opinion, the owner has a propensity for creating adversity in some shape, fashion, or form. And he will screw it up at some point in time, by getting in front of the media and saying the wrong thing and putting the pressure not only on the coaches, but those young players to be able to get it done. That's the one thing that we can always, listen, there was no way in the world the Eagles should have won the division last year.
Right.
By Jerry coming out and saying what he said, he pretty much executed his entire football team from the coaching staff right down to the last guy on the roster by creating that type of pressure that wouldn't allow them to be able to close the deal and close out the division. In my opinion, he'll do it again. My friend, listen, I appreciate your time, man. I tell each and every one of my guests every week that, our most valuable commodity is our time. I appreciate the last 1 hour and 12 minutes of your day to come on the Seth Joyner Show and
that flew by.
Huh?
That flew by. I thought it was about 40 minutes.
No, man. Listen, I'm looking at the time right now. Hour and 12 minutes and 35 seconds. But I'm sure that my viewers enjoyed today. They enjoyed getting some insight because, you answered some questions and talked about some things that that only someone that's there on a daily basis could actually do. And that's what I wanted to bring and give to, the viewers, to kind of get them up to speed as to what was going on and hear right from someone who's there watching it on a daily basis. So, my friend, I appreciate you. Thank you, man. I hope to see you soon in Philly. I'm back and forth. I'm still coming one way or the other. I'll be there, even if, I'm working virtually this year. At some point in time, I'll see you. Thank you again to my producer, Tom Schrader and Derek Stevenson. Thank you, guys. Hey, listen, you guys out there, be safe. Take care of each other. Love each other. And I'll see you next week right here on the Seth Joyner Show again. Thank you, Rue.
Thanks, Seth.